No, but I also
Like,
think
how
it was a
about
series
tampons?
of legal changes that started in Britain with the Married Women's Property Act, which said for the first time women are full legal beings under the law, they can own property. And that to me is a structure that has continued throughout, from a time when women didn't have the same legal rights as men to now when they mostly do, but culture still lags behind it.
Hi, this is Greg Jeffers. The primary purpose of my recent videos was to introduce the spectacular evolution in critical thought and reasoning that erupted in Europe, especially the United Kingdom and their American colonies, from Isaac Newton through Immanuel Kant, the late 1600s to 1800 or so, and to help people overcome the disgraceful propaganda and deceitful narratives of the late 20th and early 21st century academia. These institutions have morphed into indoctrination centers and are not the seats of higher learning that they claim to be, and that's been the case for decades. The non-STEM areas of the university system have been hijacked by crazy people suffering from demonic ideological possession. Part and parcel of this were the sweeping changes to the American economy and demographics brought on by, my assertion, the pathologically mendacious femme-sexist movement and its influence on politics and policy, especially in education, but also in healthcare, what I like to refer to as meds and eds, as in medicine and education. Meds and eds. I know I am jumping around timeline-wise, but bear with me. I must weave together disparate bits of data that you probably haven't heard connected before, like how the hanging of the Boston Martyrs was the spark that gave the West free speech, or that men fought and died for the right to vote and then gave it to their women without a shot being fired, without so much as a thank you. You will never hear this sort of analysis in a classroom controlled by mainstream academia. The people running the grievance industrial complex move their agenda forward by inches, with one deception stacked on top of another. They count on, or should I say they must count on, the cabal's ability to censor and cancel any critical thinking or examination of the matter. Before the internet, that was accomplished at the university system, where postmodernist and Marxist philosophy dominated and controlled the narrative. The femme-sexist movement, dedicated as it is to instilling in women hatred towards men, uses a cynical interpretation of history and censorship to further their cause. Please listen closely to the femme-sexist in the clip at the beginning of this video. The individual claims women were prevented from owning property. That's not just false, that is anti-truth. She is speaking of a very narrow portion of history and wants to spin it for effect. She wants to increase the level of anger and resentment of women towards their men. And they've been largely successful. It's not enough that she is an angry, overstuffed, and childless parasite. No, she would like some company in her misery. And I beg you, don't join her. Single women were not prevented from owning property during this period in the UK and never in America. If a woman wanted to marry a man, she would have to subsume her property under the marriage laws of the day, something she would have to do voluntarily and with full knowledge of the implications regarding her property. No woman was forced to marry. Now let's drill into this as a practical matter and think through the individual strategies. Many wealthy, aristocratic women took a pass on marriage. Wealthy women would only marry if there was something to be gained by it. This was business, not romance. Poor women, on the other hand, desperately wanted to marry up. That is, marry a man of higher social status and greater wealth. Now, as for poor men and poor women marrying each other, what property did the men prevent the women from owning? The acorns and apples of the commons mentioned in John Locke's treatise? Or silver, which was the money of the day? Well, that's silly, isn't it? Of course women could own the foodstuffs they grew, raised, or gathered, and they could certainly trade those and other services for silver, so we must be talking about something else. And we are. We are talking about all of the social friction that came with the advent of the Industrial Revolution and in the wake of the Enlightenment. And if you listen closely to all of the femme-sexist arguments, you will find this at their foundation. They wish to relitigate how long it took to achieve the social change they wanted in the post-Enlightenment period. Since the past is unchangeable, they seem willing to settle for perpetual anger, resentment, and a lonely old age. Imagine trying to relitigate the time period between Ben Franklin's kite and the internet. It took 250 years. From an ontological perspective, the common man couldn't have prevented the common woman from owning property throughout history of civilization until John Locke, because the idea of property hadn't even been properly defined. And as a practical matter, outside of land, there wasn't very much property to own until the Industrial Revolution was well underway. Just look at the public records of wills and estates in colonial America. The people had nothing. I dare say most people still have no idea of property rights. The mean-spirited people running the grievance industrial complex take full advantage of that to drive a political wedge between men and women. Because if men and women, especially those from the hated class of people who look like me, voted in unity, no other coalition could overcome them. Hence the narrative machine's war on men. The cabal needed to destroy the emotional well-being of American women and the various victim groups to cobble together a winning coalition. In the process, it blew up the family, fed the obesity epidemic, pun intended, with the political assistance of Big Pharma and the processed and fast food industries, and created the divorce industrial complex. And now, more than half of American women under the age of 40 are childless. 80% of American women over the age of 40 are obese. And 1/3 of American women over 40 are taking prescription medications, antidepressants and antipsychotics, to cope with living in the wreckage the femme-sexists left in their wake. This is a human tragedy, and it is filling our morgues with deaths of despair, our hospitals with diabetes and depression, and our young adults with mental illness. This set of circumstances is unacceptable, and I lay the blame squarely at the feet of the political class now dominated by you-know-who. Now I speak to the people of good faith, the people capable of bearing children and the burden of raising and providing for them properly for the decades it takes to raise a functioning and well-adjusted human being. We are not going to win the battle for the future of America on the internet. Keyboard warriors accomplish nothing. We need to reorganize locally where we are unstoppable. If you want to help, or if you want help in organizing a local meeting, reach out to us here at American Quakers at proton.me. And please, stop sending thoughts and prayers and hugs and best wishes on the internet. Show up and put up. Stop helping the very people who wish to harm us. Know who your people are, the people who believe in liberty, practice personal responsibility, and value our unique American culture, all based on the right of the freedom to speak, and just as importantly, to hear, the freedom to hear. Thank you. I'm Greg Jeffers for the American Quaker Friends Church.